an architect who's been practicing in his own practice here in Los Angeles for the last 30 years. His office is quite close to us. He's really a neighbor. He's up on Saltaire off of San Vicente, a very nice little office building that he designed. And when I called him today to talk about what I might say by way of introduction to you this evening, he started throwing out all these little interesting facts that and experiences that he had experienced in his young life, and I said, wait, hold it, I think that would be just great if you did that yourself and shared it with our students and with our audience who will be coming to hear you, because I think it would be far more interesting for you to do it than if I were just to recite certain facts. So I'm going to introduce him to you tonight, and I know that it will be much more enjoyable this way. Very happy to have with us Thornton Abell. Thank you.
I love these lights. I suppose I should start at the beginning. When my mother was pregnant, she always told me that probably the reason that I decided to be an architect was the fact that she had this compulsion to build things. I don't, of course, agree with this. I think it's rather amusing, however. She wasn't really competent in this respect, but it was fun. As I was telling Shelly, my father was a pharmacist, and he had all kinds of packing cases. And in those days, they weren't cardboard, they were wood. And some of them were quite elegant and large. And when I was very small, these things would be delivered home to be used for burning firewood and things like this. And I had the most wonderful time with these tremendous boxes. I would assemble them and cut holes, trap doors in them, and go from one to the other. It'd be 3 and 4 stories, 4 or 5 nails holding them together, optimistically, cantilevering them out. In fact, it looked like Habitat a little bit, only that was quite a while earlier. But anyway, let me see, what else could I tell you? It might be amusing. Design has always been of great interest. I think when I was 7 or 8 or in there somewhere, my mother, of course, took the Ladies' Home Journal, which it wasn't what it is now. Frank Lloyd Wright had a contract with the magazine, apparently, and every few months there'd be a very elegant drawing by him of one of his prairie houses. Some of the earlier things, they were very handsome, and I was enchanted with these things. I would cut them out and save them in a file, and I think maybe that was the focusing of my interest in that area. When I was 11, I was sure of it. And then I was dying to get courses in school for drawing and all this sort of thing, but in the little town in southwestern Michigan where I was born, it was a resort town, 5,000 in the winter and 20 in the summer. But anyway, the high school there didn't have drawing. I mean, that was early times. So I got the idea of taking an international correspondence course. So I sent in my little slip, and my father sent a check, and back came all the lessons. And I had a wonderful time. When I think of it now, it was just a brushing the surface, but it opened up the idea to me of what it was all about. Then I went to the University of Michigan, which I think was probably one of the most important years I ever experienced. Eliel Saarinen was there, the father of Errol, and he was a visiting professor of the senior class, and I was a freshman, and they gave us a choice. There were 2 design courses. One was the Beaux-Arts, rendering of orders and all this stuff, which you probably know nothing about, fortunately. And the other one was an experimental course which was taught by Knud Lonberg-Holm. He combined with Mr. Suttner on several things on exhibit design and communication and all the rest of this. He really, I think, regards an authority. But he had this wonderful course. He'd come from Denmark, and he had studied in the Bauhaus. And he had this course which might be regarded as basic design, I think, at this point. But this was had a terrific impact. We had a lovely time. We used to go into Detroit and wander up and down the back alleys and look at the backs of these buildings that really had some of the Baroque and Renaissance fronts on them in the back with the lights hanging out of the back. They were so clean and simple, and I think he gave me something that I've never forgotten. I became well acquainted with the Sarnans at the time. I knew the whole family. So Michigan was a red-letter day for me. I stayed out a year and worked in Florida during the boom. This is back in 24 and about 25. And that was a shocking experience with all the imported doors and tiles from Cuba and doors from Italy and all the affluence without taste. It was quite a contrast with what I just experienced at Michigan. And then I decided at that point I hated Florida, but I was sure I was going to like California, so I decided why not come out to California and finish school. So earlier, oh no, I won't go into that. 57 different offices during the Depression, no jobs. That was before Florida. Hot. I came out to Los Angeles, or out to Pasadena actually, and worked for a year with Joe Cosera in Pasadena. That was at the time of the Spanish colonial period. It was very interesting. There was a great deal of good taste involved, eclectic details. Some of them chose them very well and in themselves suitably, so they ended up with something that was at least reasonably well proportioned. Most of it was miserable. In the meantime, I was remembering Lonberg-Holm. The architect there would make a lovely freehand sketch in eagle drafting pencil. He had quite a technique. And he said, now that's the way I want it. Now this is not to scale. This is scale by eye. And by God, would you believe it? These windows that he showed had to be measured, and the drawings had to show the windows the size of whatever the hell he made that sketch. It's unbelievable. When he got through, it looked like the sketch, which was not convincing. It was pure theater. Well, and about then I got married, went up to Berkeley, hated the military drill with the hot, sweaty patties on the Berkeley Hills, decided Southern Cal was much better where I wanted to live. So I came back and went to USC. When I attended there, the dean was Weatherhead. It amused me. I had looked up Neutra, who had just come out here at the time. I was very intrigued by his work, and I feel it was a very definite influence. And I asked Weatherhead if he would invite him to come and talk, because I knew that he would be happy to do so. Weatherhead said I wouldn't have him darken the door, which was unbelievable. Later, he did. But this is, you can see what the period was. This is a period of great transition. There were a few people that seemed to be concerned, and the rest were frightened. The first office I worked in Los Angeles, they were doing Renaissance, little Gothic churches. Not really, but I mean they were for the Baptist Society, were very poor, and so they had to merely look Gothic and not really be Gothic. And and those wonderful tin bathtubs they used for baptism up in front. You know, that was the biggest engineering project in the church. I mean, they couldn't leak. They had a strip of glass along the front, and it had to be at such a level so that from the back of the church, certain things could be seen and other things could not while they were damp. It was really very funny. This is an area that was very new to me. And, well, let's see. I'm going too slowly. I got my license in '36. And in about that time, we bought some property out in Santa Monica Canyon, really rustic canyon. We loved it out there. And we decided we're going to build a house. And I had a mother-in-law. Oh, first we built a little guest house in the bottom where we had 4 cats and a dog and 2 boys in a 12 by 20 foot space plus a little bit of an alcove with a shower. no sink. But it was great. We built a fireplace immediately. And at that time I was drawing plans for this house we were going to build on the property on a table this big, fighting off the creatures. And then, should we have a slide perhaps? This was exciting because my wife's mother was there, and we had the two boys, and we all had to have, oh no, I didn't want to do that. I'm sorry. Could you put it back? Oh, do I put it back? Ah. Yeah, I see. No, it's just,
Forward and back.
okay. This is the plan of the house as it was developed. The street, let's see, I should, got too many hands here. How do you do this thing? Oh, it works. The upper level, there's the street up above, and this was on a rather steep hill but leveling toward the bottom. And our problem was that each person had to have a room and a bath separate from every other, so if they got mad at the rest of the family, they could retire to it. So it wasn't a conventional house in that respect. I originally designed it in steel, hopefully, but that money was a problem, and that was out of the question. So I went back to wood stud and plaster, and that's the way it still is. Up in the entrance is there, and the upper level has a sitting, dining, and my mother-in-law's room and bath, the older boy's room and bath, kitchen, laundry, and out. My wife, the other thing was my wife said she had to get out on the ground at every level. And here we were with 5 levels of house, which was fun. We had a little fire escape here that goes down. That was illegal. I had to call it a trellis until after the building department left. And then we go down half a level, this circular stairway to the younger boy's room and a shop under the garage, then on down another level to the living and a study. And we like to sleep out of doors, so we never did have a bedroom. We have a dressing bath and the porch, which we still use. But it was a great house for entertaining because we could pull partitions and fill it up. We've had, any number of people there on all occasions. Oh, I did the wrong one. Shall I try again? This is I guess my focus isn't too great, but this is the entrance to the house from the street going down. I'll put this thing away, then I can. And this is looking down from the road, from the street above at the Lath House, and there's a sun deck up on top, which is the extra level, and the other deck is there. This is looking up from below. That's the living room and the mother-in-law's room. I've always been quite a gardener for several generations, and so this is a pleasure for me to always have more than I can possibly do. This is a view from the garden looking back. This was built in 1937, and the funny part of all these pictures, I meant to tell you earlier, Shelly called me a few months ago if I would talk about things of this sort, and she said, well, we'll need slides. And it suddenly dawned on me I had about 2 or 3 slides on 2 or 3 houses that Julia Shulman had given me when I was having pictures taken, and I had nothing. And I'd gotten a good camera, and I suddenly said, well, I'm going out and take pictures. So I go out to these houses that were built 18 years ago, 20 years ago, to take pictures. Most of them had the original owners. Many of them did, and it was sort of fun to see them. So most of these pictures, except for a few Julia's took, were within the last month or so. This is the terrace. This is in the living room. The focus isn't very good with me. I think I didn't do too well in the focusing, but it's a great room to entertain in. And this is this was built in 44, I think. This is a little place that is right, we bought a lot just down the hill from us, one door, and this was during World War II. And it had You see that plan up at the top? I'll get this little thing. This little thing up there, there were, it must have been 5 or 6 lots with one tail lot up to the upper street that we bought. And on it was this little place, a toilet and lavatory for women and for men, and a shower. And there was no house on the property. This belonged to a family up in Santa Monica who were quite old. They were Catholic, and they had the sisters there, and the children from the Catholic schools would come down maybe once or twice a year for a picnic. And this was the so-called bathhouse that John and Tenza insisted on calling it in the magazine. The bath was very limited. But anyway, during World War II, Richard Haynes, the artist who was one of our great friends, was working in the plaster shop at Douglas, and they needed a place to live. And so it occurred to me that maybe, seeing this, they wouldn't allow you to build new buildings, so we could remodel this thing into a house for a war worker, which was permitted at that time. Garages weren't permitted, of course. So we demolished the upper part of this thing, which is a parapet of brick, and used the brick to build this wall here in the fireplace, and all the broken brick paid the terraces. And I kicked out one wall of the men's room and made it into a kitchen, opened the shower into this other deal, and added this one room, really, with some sliding panels, and it became a house, which is lots of fun. And this is a view of the house from up the hill looking into the bedroom area. And I have since added a bedroom on this thing for the people that bought the house. We originally rented it to people for years and sold it to some very delightful people. And they needed another room, so we added a bedroom here which extends the thing. And this is on the back in the terrace, originally where they have this terrible furniture, which they should dispose of, was a trellis outdoor eating, and they enclosed it with glass, and he did a very nice job. He's an artist, and she's a gardener, and we were delighted to have them there. There's a view I took the other day, and they're a delightful dog. That's Edna. Edna is a dear. She's going blind with cat. Can you hear me at all? Am I away from this thing too far? She's the most delightful dog I've ever seen. She can't hear very well. I mean, she can't see very well to hear either. But she makes the house worthwhile. Oh, this is the Miller house. This was, I got some dates here. When the devil was this? I've got these in chronological order. Now, if I had glasses to my hand, I'll really be in trouble. Miller is 48. This was done in 1948. It was an interesting project. Judith and Pedro Miller. Judith is now teaching at UCLA, and he was a ceramic teacher at Long Beach State, I think, originally. And they bought this property just south of Palos Verdes and just outside the Palos Verdes restrictions, which we were pleased about. A lot of property, and we designed an elaborate collection of things. There was a building that was going to be for they had 4 boys, and sort of a recreation room and a kitchen deal, and 4 bunk rooms and a long corridor for extra use. And then there was to be a small house for Mr. Pedro Miller's sister, who, what did she do? What'd she do? I don't know. She was a teacher, I think. In any case, she was to live there, and well, it was quite an elaborate affair, and there was a main part of the house. None of these things were built except the original unit for the boys, and that's what this is. They've added one small thing onto it, but basically it's the same thing. And this was the entrance and the corridor. This was the back. Each bedroom would open out onto a terrace. This was a poured concrete, exposed concrete house with completely unfinished wood roof construction. And this is the corridor. I photographed these things without rearranging anything. I mean, sometimes I perhaps should have, but this is the living area. Now, they added on the portion where the chairs are. The original living room was much smaller, but they did very well with it. It's an integral color concrete floor waxed, and it's all it's ever been, and it still looks great. Oh, this is the Haynes House. This is a house I did for Richard Haynes after their family increased and he became very successful as a painter. They bought property and I designed the house for them. This was done in 1950. I don't know that it's a strong enough print to show. In any case, this was a concrete block, basically house, this wall here, and plastic above, and there was a large living room area and a outdoor porch sitting area where you could have some paintings even, and they're sleeping, and then a place for the two boys, bath, kitchen, and then down to a small studio and a single garage in the bottom and the alley below, high at the top, levelish, and then down again, which is a typical canyon property. This is the entrance. These were a natural warm colored concrete block that were never touched with anything. And the corrugated plastic is somewhat deteriorated, but it seems to be holding. And this is out on the terrace looking into the house, into the living area. It was rather overgrown in a way, and yet she was waiting for a tree man to come to trim some of the eucalyptus that are behind where the picture is so they get a little more sun, but that wasn't done. And this is one of his murals, which has been up there quite a while in this outside porch. This is in the living room with the plastic above in the fireplace. This is looking the other direction. Now that's a sliding panel that opens the wall into the bedroom. Well, this is my office, which was done in '54. I bought the properties years before, and I had to have a building. I decided to design it so it could be moved, and it was completely modular. And the screen there separating the parking gave us a garden in behind, which works very well, and there was a reception area and the lavatory and toilet and shower and conference and drafting, and it all is one space. There are only two posts in it, and those panels all can be moved. And this is out in front, taken the other day. The building across the street has just been nearly finished. And this is in the patio looking in. We stayed outside to look in because of the disorder within. I'd hate to have had to clean the place up to take a picture. This is looking in the patio again, which is a great place to look out at when you're tired. This is in the conference looking out. And this is in the drafting area. Oh, it is a mess, isn't it? This is a Waukee House, and this was done in, forgive me, done in '56. This was on a property in Reeves Canyon for a terrific person. She didn't want to live in it necessarily, but she wanted to build it because she said she couldn't sell the lot without something on it. There was a channel along here, and you'd have to build a bridge across, and then there were some banks up behind. And so we decided to do this, and it really is, and the house was sold, and it was recently sold again. I happened to get in and take a few pictures when the first buyer had some things left in it, and the other one hadn't moved in. Car cellar over here, entry, a large living, dining, kitchen, and this is a wing with dark room and so forth because the first owner was a professional photographer, and 2 bedrooms, bath, and an owner bedroom here. And this is the front area. This again was concrete block and redwood siding. This is out on the living terrace. And the interior, this is the furniture that the guy that owned the house, when he sold it, moving to Ireland, he couldn't take with him. Probably just as well. I must learn how to focus my camera. I see it's unfortunate. Anyway, this is looking out on patios from the living area. These skylights were lots of fun. They give a certain amount of life in this rather high area, and actually you feel more light than the picture would indicate. This is the Allman House, and this one is 18 years old. I remember the other night when she was telling me. I'd have to stop and figure how much that would be, but I guess I'm using this up, leaving it on. This was an interesting problem. I've never had clients who were so special in their requirements. She is a very fine sculptress and a gourmet cook, and he is a very brilliant, well-read guy and terribly exact and interested in detail. He wanted to understand absolutely every detail went into the house, and this was very interesting and very strenuous. But we were very good friends, and it was an interesting experience. We probably had moments of great pleasure. And this is one of the few houses I've done where there's absolutely no structural order. There isn't a single opening or wall that has anything whatever to do with structural materials, sizes. Usually I try to get some kind of fix something that will give a certain sense of continuity, a certain sense of order. My office it's really a 12-foot modular or a 2-foot modular or a 4, 8, 6 or whatever. It gives you a sense of repetition, even though you may not have to measure them. But there isn't a single dimension in this house that is orderly in that respect. However, it's designed to fit their requirements, and I think the whole thing holds together so you aren't conscious of this. I know I was there the other night, and I was conscious only of a very pleasant surrounding that they had made. It's for 2 people. The studio is down in the bottom corner, and it's a working studio where she does all kinds of elegant things, carving and clay and everything else. And the kitchen is a kitchen that I refer to frequently because the darn thing really works. She knew exactly where every little item was to go and in what relation, and then she put them there, and the darn things really work. Then dining, living area, and then a very elegant master area, and then a guest space. It really is not a big house in capacity, but very large in space. They have since added a studio over beyond that doesn't show on this because I had no records of it, by Mr. Tedesco, and he did a beautiful job on it. This is the front of the house. This is cedar. It had sort of a white deposit on it that eventually wore off, and it gave it rather a grade cast. And this is Jane in front of the cars. This is a picture she took, but it was sort of fun. She's really one of the greatest people, and she's exactly the same as she was when I first met her, which is amazing. These were concrete tile with pebbles in them, which was purely for texture, but it worked well with their things. This is out on the terrace off the living room. It's a beautiful situation with large trees overlooking the Riviera Club. You feel like you're almost alone in the area, and yet there are houses on either side. This is from below looking up. This is inside looking out across the dining area. Looking back, and this is one of her sculptures here in alabaster. It's really quite elegant. And this is a breakfast space, part of the kitchen assembly. And the kitchen itself, no shelves above or cupboards above the work counter of any kind. An island there for food preparation, and this counter over here is where the dishwashing area, and the dishes are behind, so the dishes never enter the other side of the kitchen. She really had it worked out beautifully. This is looking down the gallery hall through the guest area out to the pool. And this is in the pool area. That's one of her, it's a fiberglass sculpture, fortunately. I mean, it would be difficult to lift otherwise. And the other night it was spouting water, which I didn't think so added to it, but in itself, I think it's very pleasing. This is the Ullman House. Oh, I give up. These are in chronological order, and forget the dates. Who cares? This one was very interesting experience. This house, O'Neill Ford from San Antonio, was a very dear friend of the Edelmans, apparently, and I met them through another client. And he had designed a house for the Edelmans, Lucy and his, and they owned a chain of theaters in Texas, Dallas, I think it was. And she had some decorator experience. She was knowledgeable as to fabrics and materials, that's what I would like to say. And she also was an amateur painter, studying with Sarasavas, and she actually was quite an accomplished painter. She had a very good color sense. O'Neill Ford made some rough preliminaries for them, and they weren't terribly satisfied, and yet they liked them, and he wanted to, she was a very dear friend, and he wanted to do it, and he asked me if I would take over the job and see what I could do. So I took it over. And this house has some basis on his initial layout, but actually it is an entirely different scheme, because her intimate relationship to the plans and the spaces was quite different than what it was in the beginning. Anyway, it was, they bought the Chaplin estate, Charlie Chaplin estate. They subdivided it. And this spot where this house is where the swimming pool was. And that was an oval swimming pool, and part of the work for the contractor was to remove it, because that's where the house was going. And he gave Mr. Edelman a contract to do it, and he started to take the thing out. The bottom of that pool was 4 feet thick. It was a massive concrete. They dug too deep, and they just poured in concrete. So I think he had a bad deal. But the tennis court is down below, and that's what they retained, and the house had to fit in the space. There's a garage, a car shelter, a small recreation room, and a maid's room and bath underneath. And you come up steps outside or an interior stairway. Inside. Their project a few years later. This was up in Roscommare Canyon. And the client was an amateur photographer and composer and heaven knows what, and a terrific guy. And we had the swimming pool, and he wanted really a room where he could do his photographic work, could entertain and play music, because he had all kinds of hi-fi equipment. It's an amazing bunch of stuff he has, instruments of all kinds. He entertained a great deal. And it was a garden room type thing, so part of the roof was plastic. And the shape of it is determined by the canyon. This is what we had. We had sort of a triangular nibbled piece of pie there to work with, and that's what we made the building, but it was fun. And this is looking down, and this is also showing the house beyond. We added a bedroom, bath, dressing room assembly to the existing house below, which related to this. This is on the terrace. And this is going up the steps from the house up to the pool area. This was pebble concrete on the whole, all the surface of small Lamitas pebbles ground. It was really quite a job. And this is inside, looking down into the living area. And lots of plants over in the far end where the plastic roof was. This is on the steps going down from the house addition down to the lower part. He's quite a gardener. He had beautiful plants there. This is, this is a house for Dick and Martha Moore. They're still in the house. I went over to see them. It looks so much better now than it did. It's funny. They have very nice things they have been able to afford to put in it. This is on Chautauqua, above sunset, up on a knoll with a grove of trees through here with a view of the whole Santa Monica Bay. And they had so little money that it had to be absolutely a tract house in plan and in size. The rooms are small. It's an absolutely orderly arrangement. There's nothing to distinguish itself particularly. Underneath is a double-car garage, and underneath the bedrooms back there on the right-hand side is a book room. His business is finding books. He collects them from all over the world for people. If they want something out of print, he'll find it for them. And this is the drive going up to the garage, the house, and the living and kitchen area, parking, extra parking underneath. This is from below looking up, so you can see the kind of a hill it is. And this is the deck looking up the mountains. You might as well be all alone there. You feel so absolutely separated from all other houses. It's really a delightful spot. In the living room looking down towards the Santa Monica, towards the city of Santa Monica. And this is looking out towards the mountains in the other direction. But for a little tract house, they've had a lot of fun there. This is the Newfield house, Arthur and Catherine Newfield. They were delightful people to work with. Catherine was quite an accomplished amateur painter. She was very versatile. I never have seen anyone with quite the talent that she had. She had the ability to practically duplicate the style of any painting she chose, which isn't creative in any particular sense, but it's skillful. And you walk down the gallery in that house, and there are a group of paintings, and she'd made them all. You would not believe it. They look like individual painters had done them, and they're done with great taste and excellent color. And these, again, this was for two people. It's marvelous when two people can do this much. Her bedroom, his bedroom, dressing bath, out to the pool, and they swam the length of this narrow, long pool every morning, which is great. And the small patio in the middle, and living, dining, and she again was an expert cook, but a lot of her cooking, she had a very fine woman who did the major part, and her room is here. This is the entrance. It's this is off Burlingame, I think it is, north of Salmon Sunny below Sunset. You go up quite an incline to get to the house. Her family was had a great deal to do with the Los Angeles Brick Company as well as many other companies. And so we used the Dutch white brick made by the Los Angeles Brick Company, which is one of the elements that they wanted to include in the house. This is the inner court, which would have been much better if the glass hadn't been tinted, particularly if you're going to view paintings on the opposite wall. But this, she was so afraid of deteriorating the carpets and things that she did this, and I've regretted it, because it doesn't improve. I thought that bug was on the film, but it wasn't, fortunately. This is the baker's house, and Dr. Augustus C.P. Bakis. He's Greek background, and he wanted a Greek house, and he had some Greek statuary and things of this sort at the house that he lived in Hollywood when we were discussing the plans. And he had this lot up above Laurel Canyon, which had a 3 12 pitch roof restriction. And it was an interesting challenge because we decided we didn't want to do a so-called ranch house up there for anybody. So we decided to turn it the other way and make a repeating roof in the other direction, because also due to the fact he was a hi-fi enthusiast, and with acoustic plaster on the ceiling and in this particular form in an excellent space for sound. The Greek influence indicated a terrazzo floor, which he loved, and it turned out very nicely. expensive. And he wanted stone, so we used stone on certain areas, the fireplace mast and here. And this hill was a project. This was a 45-degree hill, which was then allowed. It was just straight up. You looked it squarely in the face. And what would a landscape guy do with it? But Bob Forey, at that time, was doing landscaping for various clients, and he had an inspiration. He said, well, he likes the classic background. Let's consider this a stage set. And so he dug trenches parallel with the width of the hill, across the hill, but staggering and in different lengths, and planted Italian cypresses in groups on these things. And the end result was about like the wings on a stage. It destroyed this long 45-angle pitch to such an extent that you were not conscious of it. You had the feeling of motion and contrasting shadow. And at night, with a certain amount of lighting, the thing was absolutely dramatic. And as the trees have grown, it's far better than it was in the pictures. This is the, and there are the trees. And it gives you a feeling of maybe you're not crowded as it had appeared before anything was planted. Sorry. You want to change the roll? I think that's the end, isn't it, of that one? I've got a few more in the other. Hope I'm not taking too long on this. At least you're getting a blow-by-blow account of some of these, which is what it amounts to. But I don't know, that's the thing about houses. I'm emphasizing houses because some of them are the more interesting things, experiences that I've had. They're personal, and they all have bathrooms, kitchens, sleeping bedrooms, and living rooms, but that's where the similarity ends. Oh, this is a house that one of my favorite jobs. I enjoyed this more than any other, and this was a house and studio for Rico, LeBrun, and Constance. She was is the daughter of Reginald Johnson, one of the early 20s and 30s architects here, who was a terrific guy. Joe Johnson, an architect at present, is her brother, and she is a terrific person in her own right. And Rico, I think, was one of the most articulate artists I've ever had anything to do with. This was a relationship that was absolutely unique, and it's irreplaceable. I admired his paintings, and the process of developing the house was the most thrilling, almost the most thrilling job I've ever had. We wanted natural material. We wanted concrete without anything on it. We wanted it to be used where possible. This was up in Zuma Canyon, where there was some fire hazard, and we wanted to have the thing fire resistant as much as possible. We used a steel beam and column frame on the basic module, and then wood joist construction between, and rock roof, and we had sprinklers designed in case of any need. Fortunately, there hasn't been. And the studio is 2,000 square feet area. The house was about 2,000 square feet. That studio was 20 by 40, and that was 12 feet high, and the walls are doors. Each door is 4 by 12 feet, hollow core. And the problem was to get doors that would hold their shape. These were made by Douglas Aircraft. They were the paper core. They had a division that made them at that time, and they've held up remarkably well. There was something to hang, though. And the paintings, as you can see, that deep thing is a 12-foot cube with racks, because Rico didn't paint small. He painted paintings for museums and large public buildings, and they were very elegant, and they had to have a home, some of them. And then there were other shallower storage in other areas and horizontal divisions. This was really quite a storage problem. Then there was a plaster shop out in back, and a welding metal area for sculpture, a small painting studio, sketching, and a dark room over here because Constance took pictures of his work, and this was an area for her to process things. Then back in the house, there's a small guest room and their son's room while he was living at home. To the right is the living room and the dining area with it, and the kitchen, pantry, laundry with an outdoor area, but everything looking towards the east because that's the desirable exposure for the house. Then storage wall back to their bedroom, bath, dressing, and then an office area which was a link to the studio where he kept files of prints and drawings, and the patio. This is a view of the house as you enter the driveway from the street. It's quite a ways back. It was in an orchard. And the reason I got the job, they liked the fence I used at my office, and they came by and said, "We like that fence." So, you see the fence? That's just like my office. But I like the fence, too. And we have a skylight that runs on through, which is pleasant. We entered through the car shelter, but we managed to pave the part that people walk on with slate rather, and the skylight emphasizes so you wouldn't lose your way among the bicycles. This is out on the terrace outside the living dining area. And this is out beyond, looking back across the terrace to the living area. It made a great place outdoors. They have a table out there where they used to eat a great deal. This is in the living room, looking out. This is back toward the fireplace with one of his paintings back there. And the concrete inside has never been touched. And it's the most beautiful background for his paintings, which are raw umber and a little touch of burnt sienna and black and grays. There's a great deal of warmth in them, and against the concrete, we used the Colton cement, which is a warmer tone than the Riverside cement in the house, because when we're going to use it as a natural color, we wanted a good color. This is out in the little inner court. There's a little fish pond there that I furnished fish and plants for. I think they need attention, though. My fish get fed. And this is outside of the studio, and that's it's an interesting skylight because we have light coming from the south, reflecting into the north and down to the north wall of the studio where we painted, and the light quality worked very well. We made a mock-up of it to see exactly what would happen with the light if we did this. This is out behind the studio, and this is an aluminum door with plastic, acrylic, on the face of it to light the plaster studio when the door is down and as a sunshade when the door is up. And it worked very well. And this is in the studio itself. Rico died 4 or 5 months after the house of terminal cancer after the house was finished, which was shocking to all of us. He didn't realize it was going to happen, and none of us did. But we hurried to try to get the house done, and it was really quite an experience. And Constance, sometime later, remarried, and her husband, John Crown, was an accomplished pianist who also taught at USC. Hence the grand pianos, which were not there when Rico was there. But he liked the room because it's a wood floor, and these hollow panel doors that were 4 by 12 made a marvelous resonant quality, and he said it really, he found the room one of the best rooms he'd ever practiced in. It was not intended for that. This is the Siskin's house in Brentwood. This was an interesting experience. The people, I had done a couple of remodelings to a little house for them, and they came one Sunday morning and said, "We've seen a lot, and we want you to see it. It's only $109,000. And well, it must be damn good. But we went to see it, and it's the most elegant lot. And in that location, that price was not absurd if you could afford to pay it. There were 57 trees on the lot. It had been a garden area adjacent to another very old house, and they were selling it was on 3 lots. They were selling a lot on either side that had no building on, and the old house was remaining. And so we got the garden lot. But the problem was to save the trees. I only lost 3 of them. But we built the house around the trees. Well, this was a young couple who apparently cost was not the problem. And they had 3 children and later had 4. And the children's wing is back here, in a playroom, the kitchen, the maid's rooms, the dining area. She entertained a great deal in the living and the library and the master bedroom. With an intercom system and a couple of maids, she could sleep here and the children could sleep here without being disturbed or worried. And this is the entrance area. This would have looked much better if I'd done it a year or 2 sooner, because they were away at the time, and I swept the terrace on the other side, and the darn thing must be 50 feet wide, and it's an awful lot of sweeping. This is in the living area, but the fun of this house was the fact, here's a patio over here, in which were trees. We built the house around them. And over here, these trees were all there. All we had to do, the landscape man, was to supplement what was there. And this is an enormous stone pine outside that it looks better when the windows are cleaner and my focus is better. This is outside looking in. This is in an inner court down near the breakfast room, and there we had a tree we had to tie the truss up to build a house around it. It was a, New Zealand Christmas, I think they called it. In any case, it was quite a nice foliage, and we pruned it a little bit and pulled it, wired it together, and then we could build a house around it. Oh, this is the other courtyard. It's a little confusing when there's so many of them. This is a house for the Gustive Ridge, and it's on Elkins Road in Brentwood. These are all interesting problems. They were people that had lived in apartments in the past, and they wanted a house that had the quality of an apartment. So the bedroom wing is, well, that's a neat trick, you know. But in a way, we did it, because here are the bedrooms over here and a little study and bath dressing, and it's just a compartment. And then the living, dining, kitchen is another compartment. The garage is here. That was an existing olive, a very good one. That was a flaming eucalyptus, both of which over here was one of these strange fuzzy pine things that I really don't know what they are, but they look like they're prehistoric. But we couldn't hurt it. So we had to work between these 3 trees and try to end up with a swimming pool down here and all the trimmings. And this is the entrance of the house from the street. You drive down a moderately steep drive to get onto a parking area. And we didn't want lights to shine into the house, so we put a service court there and the laundry around so that he wouldn't be disturbed. This is the olive tree court, which is off the entry passage. And this is out behind the swimming pool, and the porch originally was not enclosed. It was enclosed recently because she wanted to use it in colder weather. And that's the flaming eucalyptus that we saved, all but one branch. And this is from the garden down below looking up. It's rather amusing. They were enchanted with the marble tile material that was used on the County Art Museum. And there it runs vertically. And they made an arrangement to buy some, and my job was to use it on the chimney. So we arranged it horizontally, and that's what we got. This is the Prey house. This is more, 67 or 8 or 9 in there somewhere. This is not too long ago. This is a street up, he's a professor of biology who's a horticulturist and an idiot on the subject, as I am. And we've had lots of fun together with plants. And he bought this property, he's a bachelor, and he bought the property down near San Pedro, up Miralesta Estates, which look due east, or across, showing the bridge, and I think you can see the Queen Mary. And that green bridge is rather handsome from here. Lots of nice trees and quite a hill. Garage on the top. Oh, we had the Palace Verde tile restriction. This was sort of fun because it was a challenge. Neither of us wanted tile, so we covered it up. The only tile you see is at the front here. Then you go on down. And he's a collector of plants. And this is a view. This is from below looking up at the living room. We had originally designed a last house that came out here, but he couldn't afford it, and it's just as well. This is looking across the living terrace, and the view there would have been much nicer if it had been more clear, but it is nevertheless a nice view. This is the entrance going back to the bedrooms. This is from his bedroom looking to the trees. This is the Allman House, which was done in about 3 years ago. This was done on the only remaining lot in Westwood. You wouldn't believe it, but this lot I didn't even know it existed. It had belonged to an architect friend who was going to build a house out, and he gave up the idea and apparently offered it on the market, and these people bought the lot. And we went to look at it, and you look out over the back, which is in that direction. You don't see quite all the lot. And you look into a forest of trees overlooking the park there near the Los Angeles Country Club, and you think that you're really in the mountains. And on either side there are high rows of trees and hedges, and you have the feeling in the living room that you really are miles from anywhere. You're just a block off Wilshire, which is just amazing. Anyway, you drive up, and the house is level. Car shelter and a little entrance patio, living, dining, and a through kitchen, service patio. Playroom, they have 1, 2, 3, 4 children, each of an age requiring a separate room, and very busy with a paddle tennis court, and the swimming pool down behind at a lower level. But it was really, and the master bedroom bath dressing over here to keep away from the children, fortunately. And this is this slide was damaged. It's turned green. It isn't green at all. The living area. And this faces north, and they've never bothered with curtains because the view there is so beautiful. This is the kitchen area. This is in the playroom, looking back past the kitchen bar area into the dining. It's all more or less one room. And this is out behind the swimming pool looking back. Oh, this is one of the last ones, more recent. This is down in San Clemente, right next door to Nixon's estate. It was debatable, but they did it anyway. And it's a very small lot, and this came in the coastline area, and there's a rather steep bank down to the next street with another series of lots. In the middle of one of those, right in the middle of our view, is one palm tree. I was sure we should plant 1 or 2 to keep it from being lonesome, but we didn't. But the problem here was a tight lot that had to be used, and these are an older couple that again, didn't want a lot of garden. They wanted lots of paving. Another amateur painter. And she hated to just go walk right into the house. She wanted to confuse the issue a little bit somehow. So we confused it for her by showing you couldn't see through the gallery into the living room if you tried, and yet you can get there if you walk along the gallery. Well, how did we get 2 of these things? This was just when it was about finished, but not planted. It was much better. This tree, incidentally, was one that they bought. There was no tree on the property. And they had quite an argument with the planning department, the planning homeowners group there in this little restricted subdivision. No tree was allowed to be over a certain height. But it struck me awfully funny because trees do grow. In fact, the president of the Homeowners Association had some trees that were taller than they should have been. But anyway, she bought the tree and planted the damn thing, and it was, I think, 5 or 6 feet taller than the limit. Well, she managed to win, and she's got the tree. But it saves everything. But this was redwood, concrete blocks, natural, and plaster. And here's the confusion inside. You go down here and you turn right, and you find you really are in the house. And this is, again, the gallery and the living terrace. Another thing, we have the wind, prevailing winds from the ocean, and we wanted this inner area to be the place where you're going to spend your time. More like a room. Looking back towards the living, but the reflection wouldn't allow it. This is the breakfast area. Oh, this is the Siskin office building. I thought I'd bring a couple of other things. This is over on Pontius, and the problem here was that they wanted an office building without any windows on the front, but they wanted a couple of atriums inside, which we have, and they worked out very well. I mean, you feel like you have an outdoor area with some plants, but you don't look across the street at a bunch of lumber yards and apartments. And there's 2 levels of garage, one entering here ramping up and one from the alley, which is a little lower ramping down, and 2 levels of offices. It should have been more to be economic, but that was the way they wanted it. This is the atrium inside in one of the office areas. And this is the project that we are now adding on to. This is the art building at Cal State University in Fullerton. This is the original scheme, and the yellow is the additions that were just allocated space, weren't necessarily the way they would be. The left-hand unit there would be the gallery, administrative offices, and exhibit design, and then the middle section with the ceramics, and over here with metal design and sculpture. Those are 1-story buildings where the heavy things were. In this building here, a 2-story building, there was the printing area and painting studios. On the upper floor was fabrics and photographic areas, and then elementary, what was it? Elementary design or something. It was used for teachers. They had courses for teachers there that had to have a smattering of a lot of things. Anyway, that's the basic project. The black part was built, a few years ago. And now we're in the process of working on an addition which is going to add something down in here and also something back behind the sculpture. And it's in a very, didn't bring anything along because it hasn't reached that point. But this is the developed plan of the units and the upper level of the 2-story unit. The colors represent department type things. And this is it was taken at the time it was built. These were some that Julius took. And it's very different now because the planting has now grown tremendously. This is going into the gallery area with some sliding aluminum panels to give a little security for those areas. This is a pool, and this pool is used. This was a lot of fun. In the program, we decided we had to have some pools, and yet if you put a reflection pool into a government project, this was partially federally financed, a reflection pool is out. It's a luxury. So we call these sunken outside work areas. The funny part of it is that this wasn't a prevarication. This has a large sculpture in it for the kids, and the idea being that they would work with things that would be used water in connection with it. There would be lighting and various forms. They've had numbers of things in this pool, and there are 2 other pools in the area, and they all are sunken outside work areas, and they really are. So it was sort of fun. looking back towards some of the outside painting areas, these were cedar panels for visual enclosure. Here's another outside sunken work area. And here's the administrative. This was a sort of a socializing area, and also could be locked if they had anything of value that they didn't want that somebody could carry away. Most of the stuff they're doing now, you don't carry away unless they make it out of fiberglass, then you demolish it. This is the other end towards the campus. And these were sunscreens that seemed to work quite well. They were precast and assembled in trees. This is in one of the studios. Now the interior shots, why, I don't know what happened, but they're all green. And the room, nobody was doing anything. It was just during the Depression. No, it was before the Depression, but still they weren't doing anything. In the summer in Chicago, you don't. And anyway, it was an exciting experience. It's funny, I applied to a job with Elmsley, and he was such a nice guy. And after I got this job in Florida, I got word that he had sent a letter to Michigan saying he found a place for me. And I often think how different things would have been. Instead of the theater in Florida, I've been working under a great man. Would have been very interesting. Of course, I might not have gotten to California, and that would have been wrong. I like it here. Speaking of historical modern, we had a group of UCLA students a year or so ago go to the house and said, "My, it's nice to see antique modern." That's a neat trick if you can do it.
Speaking of that, Thornton, I think one of the interesting things that I do is you go into the 30s for your first house you built on for yourself. That house comes closer today to being similar to many of the movements, particularly in the East, that are and work through that. Than say the later work, and it's probably the only house, but I guess moved through more than 2 levels from that point on to today that you did.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of curious and interesting if you could expound on a little bit why, later when you picked up in 44 and 47, 48 after the war, you then moved to a completely different method of dealing with main sites and what you had. I was in a feeling there's a certain character or cycle that takes place in architecture anyway. After so many years, it seems like we move backwards or to another point.
Well, it was funny, the thing that impressed me, I never really thought about it particularly, but when I got all these slides together, ranging over quite a period, I suddenly had a feeling, my God, this is monotonous as hell. I mean, this is just basically similar things from the beginning to the end. And I suddenly thought maybe I have a regression or something. Maybe I'm arrested development, Well, yeah, that appears, but I don't feel particularly stuck in any particular moment. I think each project is a new experience, and you have new requirements, and believe me, clients vary, and you're spending their money, and the interesting challenge is to try to make something that will make them feel at home as a part of them. And of course, I've had one client tell me she had very definite requirements, and we could solve some of them, but some of the others couldn't be done. And we tried very hard to anticipate how she might be going to live. And so when she moved into the house, she said, "You've changed my way of life." Now, this is something to think about, the responsibility, because you don't know which way they're going to go. But you can try to look forward and see. And of course, again, you've got to get to know these people when you're doing these custom things. And of course, this actually, you get down to, this is a very limited field. When you think of multiple housing and cities and projects of that sort, this seems terribly personal and perhaps unimportant. And yet, in some ways it is, because it's complete communication and probably more exciting than almost anything that you can do. Although I must say this building project has been terribly exciting because, again, it's rather personal. I'm interested in everything they're doing, and we're communicating very closely on every department level. So it really isn't impersonal like doing an office building for a speculative developer or something of that sort, or doing a model house like I did one time without a client, and that was one of the hardest things I ever had to do. I had to be the client, and I had to set up a hypothetical spot, and I didn't have a lot. This was something that was to be moved off the site. And that was hard because you had no ground. You're designing a house for nowhere, for no one. And that was really interesting. But I don't know, there has been developments. There are a certain amount of cycles. I remember things when I was in school at Michigan that were being done in Terrace, very handsome things. And then many years later, Eames does some things in the Palisades that are very similar. I mean, the basic pattern, Mondrian type relationships. But I feel that a thing like that isn't really dated. You can't pin it down because it's so basic that why would you change it? I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. And the relationship is flexible enough to accept great modifications without destroying its form. If it becomes too self-conscious and fixed in its shape and material, you can't do much with it except say, oh yeah, that was built back in so-and-so. But you aren't sure if it's basically simple. I don't know, is anything? Yes?
What you said about the personal thing of designing the house for people and the house is for them, wasn't it easier? Like a lot of the homes were very creative people, and isn't it really helpful if somebody is aware of what his lifestyle is?
Oh, it would be, of course.
Those people seem to, they all had different ideas.
Well, yeah, varying degrees. Of course, I've been very fortunate in that respect. I've had, usually I've had clients that had interesting ways of living and things they were interested in, and that does help. Of course, maybe some of the others wouldn't necessarily want a house designed for them. They go out and buy something and be perfectly content. And if they don't know the difference between red and blue, why, they couldn't possibly care. Yes? Well, I've always felt that there's not a single solution to any problem.
I know, but when you're the architect and they're the client,
yeah, but it has to be a relationship that is sort of mixed, you know. I mean, you're working together. If we don't communicate, there's no point in going any further. I mean, you have to have a reasonable amount of communication. That doesn't mean agreement on design or color or anything else. You'd be amazed at what I did in some little houses in Santa Barbara. They were for two widows who bought this piece of property together on a barranca in Montecito. And if it's large enough, it was a multiple zone, and they could have, each of them could have two houses. And they each wanted their own little house, and they wanted another little house to rent. And this is one property, and yet it had a division, and there was a title was separated, and I could tell them where the division was to be. And there was a very responsibility. It was a triangular piece of property. I wonder who got the point and who got the other, you know. It was interesting. But anyway, we worked it out so there was a good division of space, and they were quite content with the space allotted. And the houses were built so that the rental units were up front and their places were in behind. But they were related, so it was really one project. And the chief difference between them was that this gal had an obsession of turquoise blue and things of this sort. And this gal detested all the colors this gal liked. And this one had to have browns and rose and beige, things like that. And it was rather interesting. The houses, I managed to make the exterior sufficiently neutral, which they should be in any case, I think, in this project. so that they both could come to an agreement on that. And we built a wall between them so neither one could see what the other one did. And it wasn't apparent, but it was there. And it was a very interesting project, but you've never seen such opposites in your life as these two women were. So you can have great conflicts of opinion, but not real conflicts in design. Oh, I wandered around. I don't think I probably answered your question at all.
When you're so attentive to meet the client, do you bring any values of your own solution? Do you have a set of basic values that you sense of client?
I don't think you can avoid it. Well, how do you define them? I feel that you're speaking now of values, basic values. Is that what you mean?
Well, when we talk about architecture, discuss certain values that imply other than the physical appearance or the relationship of spaces. I just wonder whether...
Well, what values are you referring to? We're dealing in materials and in space and physical accommodations and emotional impacts. What else?
I want to suggest that. I wonder what you would... I mean, from your point of view, I know that...
Well, these are all things that I'm concerned with and I have opinions on, and I have a variety of possible reactions to a situation which are tempered by the situation the client presents.
Well, for instance, I would say, are there any social opinions that you hold that you impose on design? I mean, they don't contradict the client looking for necessarily.
Perhaps I haven't had the right kind of a project to involve the social problems. Yeah, well, in that respect, yes. Well, that's always a problem. You have, actually, sometimes the conflict between the two people, the husband and wife and the family is quite extreme. Then my problem is to sort of pick out what will solve the situation and keep them together, or else you let them go away, you know.
Well, I think what we're seeing is Thornton is a very special kind of architect compared to most people who have spoken before us. I think he's probably the most user-oriented architect we've spoken here. And most people who speak are always bringing, as Michael was asked to say, and not putting emphasis on other elements in what they're doing in terms of their architectural design. And they may hardly speak to the user. And while they're talking to all other issues, and you speak so strongly to the user, which I think is kind of beautiful.
Well, it's another situation, but it's the result of certain relationships.
But I think it's a unique thing, which is strange, really, because it's the kind of thing that I think all architects deal with the user, but they seem to kind of, you get a feeling they've ignored the user as they talk to their subject.
Well, this I don't think I think perhaps there is too little attention to the user, really. I think it certainly is true of some of these large housing developments.
Well, in individual houses as well.
In the country, possibly heard Craig Elwood say things like, well, all our clients sleep on our beds. They design the beds for them, design everything for them. And if the clients don't like it, they're stuck with it. And kind of,
Well, I don't see any excuse for being...
he was telling us how so many people lived in houses while they were there and they moved out 2 years later and they were divorced now.
Yeah. That's quite a responsibility.
Also, I don't think, in all your descriptions, it seemed like did you ever have a bad relationship? It doesn't seem like you did. Everybody was...
Well, I haven't shown you anywhere near all the projects I've done. These are ones that were available that I could get pictures of. There are a lot of them that I wasn't able to get pictures of, or else something had happened. And I did a house down in Del Rey, and I think it's been removed because of the airport extension. It was fun while it lasted. Well, the noise was such it would peel your hair right back. We had to stop when a plane went over while we were building it. We should have known better. Yes.
I just have a comment. I agree with Ray. I think the fact that your user-oriented architect is very refreshing. I think probably you're the most humanistic architect I've ever heard speak.
Well, thank you very much.
When you're actually built it, when you're speaking.
Well, I'm terribly interested in the thing as a vital organism. I mean, this is something that's got to come alive and be interesting and useful to the people there, and I do it in certain ways. The only way I can do it and be satisfied in trying to get a solution on a project, you can piddle around all over the place and see these ghastly relationships, and pretty soon, if you stir long enough, you end up with something that seems to fall into line like a puzzle, and it'll suddenly say, it couldn't be any other way. And when you reach a point where it looks ridiculously simple, but you work like hell on it, it could work, it could do it. And that's the exciting moment, and that's the fun. And if you feel that strongly enough, the client catches this feeling, and then the thing will get done.
It's really refreshing to hear you come to an architecture lecture and you give the architect talk as lovingly as his client as he does about his building. It's nice to hear this.
Well, thank you. I could say other things, and I haven't. I could tell you a few details on these that really be terribly amusing, but I think it might be embarrassing to the clients, and so I haven't. Ron knows what I'm talking about. No, but it really, that's the thing about it. It's terribly personal, just like in the last job we've been doing. I suddenly dawned on me, I have to know on which side of the bed he sleeps, because certain controls go on the wall. So I call him up immediately and say, which side of the bed do you sleep on? And had to stop and think, well, let me see. Standing at the, you know, they had to figure it out. It was so automatic. So, you know, these little things make it amusing. And interesting and personal and all the rest. Oh, each one is a challenge, and they are exciting, no matter what it is. If it's an art building or if it's an office building, I haven't had an opportunity to do an industrial building, but I think I'd find it very exciting if I had an opportunity. I think they're all challenges, and they're all interesting to pick a material and a method of construction that would do the job as simply as possible with the least possible complication, and get rid of all the junk and the bugs and the confusion and chaos so they don't need a map to get around in the building. I think that perhaps is the direction I'd like to go if possible. I think we've done enough.